Guess everybody has to agree.
No.
I need to get rid of that big blue thing.
Oh. Well, I don't know if this will work because Susie's just come to bug me. Oh. All right. Well, welcome to Beginners Academy. The goal of Beginners Academy is to help new and returning hams get started or restarted in amateur radio. And tonight we're going to talk about QRP. It's one of the many options you have or interesting activities that we have in amateur radio. So specifically tonight, we're going to talk about why QRP. And I have a PowerPoint presentation, and it includes slides borrowed from George Heron into APB. Also, the nice sticker here is when you care to send the very least QRP, and that's courtesy of Larry W2LJ. So can anybody tell me what QRP means? Jump in there. All right, well, according to the slide, QRP is a Q signal, and there are many Q signals used mostly in CW, like QTH and QRM. QRP means to lower one's power, or QRP question mark, can you lower your power? The general definition for QRP is it's 5 watts of RF power or less. And so all this falls under the term of QRP. However, some QRP organizations define it as 5 watts or less for CW, or 10 watts or less for a single sideband. All right, as I'm sure you remember from your amateur radio license test, the FCC says run only the power necessary to maintain the desired communications. And certainly QRP's in that spirit, because most of the time you can communicate effectively with QRP power levels. And I'll mention, for most of you on HF, most of the radios are 100 watt rigs, but they can be turned down to QRP. All right, some QRP mathematics. We can compare the power of signals in decibels. And so we have a gain formula, 10 times the log of P2 over P1. So if we plug in 100 watts for P2 and 5 watts for P1, we get a ratio of 20. And if you finish out the formula, that is 13 decibels of gain. And 13 decibels of gain is equivalent to 2 S units on your S meter. So this is an example of, say, the 100-watt station is at S7. The QRP station would be at S5, according to the theory. So this means your 5-watt signal can be heard. Like I said, I borrowed these slides. This was just some information, examples of a lot of achievements people have made using QRP levels. There's some people who have never done anything other than QRP, and they've worked practically all the countries that you can work for DXCC. And so if you put your mind to it and practice patience and also good operating skills, QRP can do just about anything. Here's a little more scientific background here. And this is comparing CW using Morse code on-off keying with single sideband, a voice mode. The CW signal bandwidth is something on the order of 100 hertz, and SSB could be 2000 hertz. And your average power density in the bandwidth of 100 hertz is like 1 watt per hertz. And sideband is 0.05 watts per hertz. So your power in this narrow bandwidth is really more. SSB spreads the power out. And if you crunch some numbers, you come up with that 13 dB again. So theoretically, 5 watts CW is equivalent to 100 watts of SSB. So this speaks well of CW. But as we'll get to on another slide, people operate QRP and CW, SSB, and digital. And so among QRPers, so to speak, the people that practice QRP, there really are more QRP QSOs on CW than single sideband. So it's worth your while to learn the code. It's very helpful for QRP, but it's not required. When I got restarted in amateur radio, I started out in QRP, and a number of times I just couldn't find any stations to work on. Maybe I work a few on CW. And really in my mind, I didn't think you could really do SSB at QRP levels. But anyway, I found if I actually jumped over or went to the upper part of the band and tried single sideband, I could pick up quite a few contacts. So it's one of those results will vary, but it's basically if you think you can, you can. So here's a comparison that's kind of dated, maybe, but its size and weight for maybe 100-watt setup compared to a QRP setup. And in this example, which is a little extreme, maybe for 100 watts, they had 43 pounds of gear, but for QRP, they came out with 7. Well, that's one of the motivations for QRP, particularly if you're going to operate portable or travel. Your gear is going to be, the weight and size of your gear it's much less. There are lots of choices for QRP radios. This radio is the ICOM 703, which was the first new radio I got after getting back into amateur radio about 10 or 11 years ago. And it's an awesome radio, and there was really no reason for me to get any other radios. I did quite a bit with this radio, and in fact, I used it on the April Radar Challenge. So QRP radios don't have to be new radios. The ICOM 703 is pretty awesome. So you see it on a park bench, more or less, and there's a microphone on the left, a key on the right, and a lithium iron phosphate battery in the back. I believe it's 7 amp hours. So this is the kind of setup you could have operating QRP. Tom will like this one. I'm not sure exactly which radio this is. The little circuit board you can get from China for almost nothing, about $8 to $10. And it is a transceiver on a small circuit board. It is CW. And don't let this be your first or last radio. You can tell it's small because comparing it with the size of a 9-volt battery there. But it's not a great radio, but if you have a lot of patience, you can still make contacts with it. Being crystal controlled, it's only one frequency. It's not 5 watts. It's probably in the milliwatts. And the receiver bandwidth is pretty wide. So you'll hear a lot of signals. You won't be able to focus down on just one signal, but nevertheless, I think this is the cheapest rig that you're going to come by. Oh yes, this is the micro SDR. And Bob, KK4DIV, could you tell us a little bit about this radio?
How did you know I have that radio?
YouTube.
Well, it's I was on eBay. I was just looking at, I do quite a bit, just ham radio stuff. And I just stumbled across this little radio, $125, roughly, give or take, depends on where you buy it from. Different sellers have it, within $10 of that. But I believe it's a clone of a UQR, what is it? The SDX or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's a clone. It's a Chinese thing, but it's based on those plans, and it's a neat little radio. I took it out this past week and activated a park with it. So it's a SDR transceiver. I don't know, what else do you want to know about it?
Well,
it works. I mean, I activated a park with it, which I was thoroughly thrilled,
Right.
you talked about QRP, but you haven't talked, and you might in a minute, how important a good antenna is. And I used a resonant dipole antenna with this. And I think that is, if you're wanting to maximize your wattage, out of a QRP radio, a resonant dipole antenna is really the way to go. And it worked great with a dipole antenna.
Awesome. Now in this case, it does not do CW. So
it does do CW.
Oh, does it?
It does.
Oh, they
Yes,
don't really
it does.
advertise it, but okay.
It does FM, AM, sideband, and CW. And they say it will work with the digital mode. So that's going to be my next thing I want to do, is I want to hook it up and see if I can send a WinLink message with it.
Well, that's a very good point about the antenna. I don't have any slides about antennas, so I appreciate you bringing that up. And hey, maybe we're just paying too much for radios.
Hey, maybe. I mean, it's got some quirks to it,
Yeah.
But for $125, it works. I was really surprised how well it worked.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. Well, it is from China, right?
Yes, it is.
How long did it take to come in?
It actually didn't take very long. I ordered it. I had it in maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They were at that, the shipping time said it could be delivered between November 5th and December 10th, so I was expecting it to be December before I saw the thing, but I had it relatively quick. So I don't know if they actually had one in a US. No, I take that back. No, because the wrapper, it did come from China, but it came quick.
Yeah, awesome. Well, actually, this brings up a point that in some cases, QRP is less expensive than, your general radio. And so when I bought the ICOM 703, I said, I don't want to spend a lot of money. And it was cheaper than the 100-watt rig. That was one motivation to get it. And in this case, this is very cheap. So, it's good that, one problem with amateur radio could be the money. And so there's some alternatives that aren't that expensive. So
yeah, it's nice that there are some inexpensive options, and there's some QRP rigs on the exact opposite end of the spectrum as well.
Don't we know?
I have one of those as well.
We'll get to that. Yeah, and I'll throw this one in there. This one is not available anymore, but it's one that I built as a kit, and it's pretty sophisticated radio, good performance on CW, and it's not available anymore, but there are other kits, and we'll talk about some of those. And the power that I was using at the time with this QRP radio is some nickel metal hydride, I believe, cells, and it's basically AA cells, but a slightly different technology. So, that's a pretty compact power source. So here's a radio from way back. Jim, can you say anything about this radio?
Well, yeah, that's a 7 or 8. I can't, it's kind of blurred there.
It's a 8.
Was a quad bender, and I had a couple of them, and I know you had one.
Well, actually, I bought this one from you.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one of them that I had. Yeah. And it's a pretty neat little radio. It's not very big. I remember we used it when we went to the Scout Jamboree up 231 a ways. I forget exactly where it was. And I think I borrowed that one back from you to demonstrate to the scouts. I think that was it. And they were impressed and everything.
Yeah.
It's a nice little unit, which was made by Heathkit many years ago. And there's still a lot of them around. There was also a Model 7 before that. This one had some other features, and I don't remember what the difference was between them. I like your, what is that up top? Is that a SW? Oh, SWR bridge.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a QRP SWR.
Okay. I thought at first, it was an RF amp meter, and I say, boy, you are getting old. It's a SWR watt meter.
Right.
Okay.
Well, this particular rig performs very well, and I did make a QSO to France with this rig. So you can work the world with QRP, even on a vintage QRP. So next, well, we talk about size. Here's a transceiver called the Mountain Topper. And if you are into backpacking, summits on the air, taking a trip where every ounce counts, say you were going to do the Appalachian Trail, well, this might be the rig that you take because it's very small, but still performs well. So that's one of the options. So people that do summits on the air, many of them do use QRP radios. And speaking of kits, inexpensive kits, QRP Labs, that's QRP-Labs, has many popular kits. One is known as the QCX, which is CW. And this one, it's a kit that you build. I think it's only about $60. The case will cost you a bit more, but anyway, it's a single band rig, but it has very good performance. And the gentleman in the UK or that is QRP Labs is Hans Summers, and he's coming out with a multi-band rig called QSX. He just came out with a rig similar to this that does digital modes, and I think it's only about $50 or $60. So QRP can help you hold down the cost, and building kits, there's a lot of satisfaction to that. Building a kit and seeing it work. And then there are radios that pretty much do it all. This one is the Elecraft KX2, which made a really big splash when it came out. It actually is the successor of the Elecraft KX3. Everybody thought the KX3 was small, and then Elecraft came out with the KX2. And this is, as far as they do, you know, all band HF, at least radio, with great performance of the receiver, and on and on. This one is hard to beat. So it's one of my favorite QRP radios. And it's hard to illustrate just how small it is, but the next slide here, the KX2, you can hold it like a handy-talkie or walkie-talkie, use a whip antenna, and do pedestrian mobile. And I've done that quite a bit. So in my hand is the KX2 and a whip antenna. You can have a lot of fun like that. So that's hard to beat. And then all these companies try to outdo each other, and ICOM, nobody expected it. The ICOM 703 was really well, there were two predecessors to this. But really, you'll notice that this radio does practically everything that a very popular HF 100-watt rig does, which is the ICOM 7300. So actually the capabilities of the 7300 plus VHF and UHF are in a small, relatively small QRP radio. And Bob, do you have anything else to say about this radio?
That's a fantastic radio. It is truly the Cadillac of QRP rigs, I believe. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's very pricey,
Yep.
but it's an awesome radio, and just the waterfall display. I mean, it's got all the features of the 7300 in a small QRP package. It's awesome.
That's right. And that spectrum scope, you'll get spoiled with that. So
you really will. That's my first radio with one. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, a popular activity where QRP is used is summits on the air or SOTA. Ooh, I forgot to click on the sound, so I guess we won't hear it. But the person waving there on a mountain in Colorado is Steve. Let's see, it's WG0AT, and he is the old goat, the alpha goat. And he doesn't always take his goats, but he has goats that will help carry his equipment up to a mountain peak. And because I didn't check on the right box, you wouldn't hear it. But I guess we play a few seconds of this. Can you guys hear it? No. All right, I don't think you guys could hear it, so I apologize for that. But check out his YouTube videos. They're awesome. Okay, well, a few things you should also know is that QRP is a category in almost all contests in amateur radio and awards. In these contests and awards, there are different categories for different power levels, and you can make your mark by getting on QRP, and there'll be generally less competition, so you might win the category. There are also QRP organizations like QRP ARCI, that's Amateur Radio Club International. And there's also a UK group that you can join. It's known as GQRP. So if you've got the interest in QRP, there are a lot of resources, including a nice website by Larry W2LJ. So you can Google his website, and he's giving the latest information for QRPers. If you thought 5 watts was not much, you might want to try QRPP, which is less than 1 watt, basically milliwatts. And I was operating at lunchtime across from the Navy base. I heard a little signal on CW. I answered it, and it was someone in Vermont running 40 milliwatts. And it turns out that if you take 40 milliwatts and divide it by the distance, it's like 29,000 miles per watt. So 40 milliwatts is basically nothing, but nevertheless, I could hear it here in Panama City. And QRP on HF, there's good news. As the solar cycle progresses, propagation will improve, and you can work higher bands, and your QRP signal is going to do great. So over the next few years, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And your QRP rig and your magnetic loop can do a whole lot more than you thought they could. All right, well, among QRPers, there are annual events. Most of them, they're not exclusively portable events. People who aren't portable can participate, but they encourage you to go out and operate portable. One is Flight of the Bumblebees, another QRP to the Field, Skeeter Hunt, and Peanut Power Sprint. And the neat thing, there's a group of QRPers that show up for this every time. And so you get to know these folks and get to make some friends. I have a friend in Colorado, WV0 Hotel, Myron. And his goals to minimize, do QRP and minimize loss in antennas. And he's done a lot of great work with in-fed antennas and being able to minimize the loss in the transformer, things like that. So, all right, well, why QRP? We could go on and on, but among the reasons are, for one, you can actually build your own rig, either homebrew or a kit. So now, particularly if it's CW, It's pretty simple, but QRP Labs is coming up with some pretty simple rigs for digital modes and single sideband. QRP helps make outdoor operations practical. So, and particularly if you're doing SOTA or even radar, you may want to minimize what you carry, and QRP is the best way. But one of the most cool things is that when you work somebody and you tell them you're running 5 watts, they'll say, wow, I can't believe you're only running 5 watts. And you'll just hear that over and over because people are just totally surprised. There is the opposite side of the spectrum of people who work, 100 watts or 1500 watts. And that probably increases the reliability of making contacts, but nevertheless, 5 watts can do quite a bit. Another thing, you'll make lots of friends. There's really a community of QRPers. And so to sum it up, it's challenging, but lots of fun. And that's kind of what it's all about. All right. At this point, are there further comments about QRP? Bob, what's been your experience with QRP?
It's the last line there is challenging is a lot of times, but when you are successful at it, it's to me it's a lot more rewarding. It is a lot more fun than doing it with a 100-watt rig. Just trying to do more with less is what I enjoy about QRP. And I'll go back to the antenna part of it is, yeah, it's challenging, but when you are able to, put up a good antenna and overcome the fact that you're using such low power, I think that adds a lot to it as well. But and to me, the best part about operating QRP is getting outside and doing it.
Right, I would agree. Jim, you've been doing QRP for a lot of years. What would your comments be?
Yeah, I've been in and out over the years, and just recently, I guess the last couple of months, I got a FT 818, and I was anxious to get it on the air and everything, and I made one contact with it, so I knew that it worked and everything, and I was pleased with it. So I started mounting it in a go box, which is a Army military can. A PA 108 is the nomenclature on the can. It's called a I forget what it's called. It's got a nickname, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, I've been working on that and haven't turned on the 200-watt monster since then. I've made all the contacts that I've made with the 818, and it's very humbling. I forgot what it was like. And technically, the 818 is not a QRP radio because it's rated at 6 watts. Although about 4.5 is all I'm showing on the watt meter, my digital watt meter. So,
right,
I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, well, it's pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did work 2 new DX. I got that. What was it? Let me get my logbook here.
Greg, do you hear me?
I do, Frank.
Oh, okay.
Did
I
you get?
want to make sure. My screen is flickering. I don't know if it's going on. It's like jumping back and forth.
Well,
Anybody else experiencing that?
No.
It's probably on
got
your end.
Power glitches.
Okay.
Yeah.
But has anybody worked that Eswatini country, the Kingdom of Eswatini?
No.
Well, I got that, and also another one was Malta, 2 that I didn't have. I got on the 818, which I was really surprised. I learned real quick, contrary to the 200-watt radio, where you get just about everybody you call answers you. When you call them on the 818, you might have to call them more than once. So it's a
Yeah.
humbling radio.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Jim. Tom, WD0HBR. Well, I believe you've been doing almost exclusively QRP. Do you have some comments for us?
Not really anything I can add, Greg. I was not starting out as a QRP guy. I started off as a novice, and I had a 100-watt rig, and I used 100 watts. But I started backing off on the drive a little bit on the HW101 Heathkit, just to kind of see what happened. And when I dropped it down to about 75 watts, it was, no big difference. I said, well, let's go to 50 watts, and no big difference. I said, well, let's go to 25 watts, and no big difference. I kept going down, and I discovered that if I just barely tickle the amp meter in that rig, it would still make the contacts. Now, as you say, it was CW, which makes, I think, a big difference. But it was amazing to me how low I could go. And I built a little rig, made the circuit board myself, etched the board, all that kind of stuff. It was just 3 transistors. And one night I was calling on 40 meters about midnight. And I'd called and called, and nobody came back to me. All of a sudden, the guy came back, and he was in England. It was my first QRP DX station, and we had a very nice contact. And so I was convinced at that point that it was a 3-watt rig that I could operate pretty much around the world with 3 watts and a 40-meter dipole up about 40 feet. So when conditions are right, things can happen. I use QRP now because one reason, I'm in a HOA, and if I run a bit of power, I might interfere with somebody's stereo or telephone or whatever. But operating QRP, I don't worry about that too much. Nobody's complained. And I'm using very simple antennas. Antennas do make a big difference, as Bob pointed out, but I'm using just an inverted L, which is only up about 10 feet. It's a 50-foot piece of wire. Nobody notices it in the backyard here. And I worked all across the US, and with a 20-meter inverted V, which is only 10 feet up, I've worked France and Belgium and some European countries with it. So it's a lot of fun. It is a challenge. You won't be able to call somebody and have them come back every time, first call, but you can make contacts. And it's interesting to me to see how little you can get away with.
That's right. Thank you, Tom. And yeah, Bob mentioned that he worked parks on the air. And what I find is that people can hear you when they want to hear you. So if you do something like go out to a park for Parks on the Air, you become, people have a motivation to work you, and they'll come running. Also, even on huge events like Field Day, there are a lot of people that do QRP. They probably don't make as many contacts, but there's just less stuff to deal with, less gear, less things to set up, tear down. And so actually, if you're a minimalist, if you like to keep things simple, you can do that with QRP if you'd like. So, all right. Does anyone else have comments or questions about QRP tonight?
Hey,
Greg?
Greg, Mark's got something too. After you get through, Frank.
Oh, I'm having a problem here with my screen. Are you guys seeing me?
We hear you. Yeah.
Do you see me on the screen?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. Okay, I just wanted to comment on QRP there, Greg. I've been promoting up here and, influenced by you guys down here, the radar, the portable pack and go, and QRP. And I've had a lot of events out here, at least 5 of them. And I just call them out at the last minute and call the guys. And last event, 15 people showed up. And I was demonstrating the different antennas that you can do portable, and emphasizing on the magnetic loops that I make. And there's two new hams that came to see it because they put the word out on the net. And I was showing them how the loop antenna worked with the 7100 that I have in my Go box, and that was real good. So I left that hooked up to one loop antenna. Then I went to another loop antenna I just made that'll do 80 meters, and I put my 705 on there, and that just started picking up things from all over the place. And the one got two new hams says, "What is that?" I said, "That's 705." Wow. And he got on it and he made a contact, I think, to Massachusetts with and all I had was, this is, I'm gonna step back a little bit, but this is the box I got to carry my 705. This is what I had there, and everything's in here. And then I open it up, and when you open it up, it looks like this.
Hmm.
And then the microphone's on top. And then, let's see here. I'm showing it upside down. You think? Yeah, like that. And then you turn it on here. Okay, so that's all I had. The microphone's underneath. I pulled it out. I have a little cord here that I can whip out, put an antenna on it. I hooked it up to my loop antenna, and he started talking to a guy up in Maine. And the guy says, "Holy mackerel." Next day, he ran down to DX Engineering and bought one.
Oh, that's a great sales job.
Yeah. And then I met him on 3919. It's a guys that talk there called a Friendly Bunch. I met him on that, and he was all for high power stuff. So he started playing around with this little 705. And a few days later, this other guy called me up and he says, his name was Robert. Robert has gone nuts on that 705. He just called me up and told me that he was mobile, talking on a little hustler stick mobile, and he talked to Hungary with his 705 by mobile, and he says he can't believe it. So but everything you were saying about QRP and all that is correct.
Well,
is right, and I'm getting a lot of good response up here for the small radios. I'm trying to keep promoting how much more fun it would be to be outside doing things rather than sitting inside. And it's taken, a lot of people are enjoying it. And I was called to the Parma Amateur Radio Club 2 weeks ago to give a talk on my loop antennas and the portable radios. And I started by explaining to people why and how the magnetic loop works. And I started to sort of give them an idea how frequency works and how radios receive in that. And one of the ways I did it was I took a tuning fork and I explained to them how a tuning fork works and why it stays at a certain frequency. And if you take a tuning fork and you have another one nearby that's the same frequency, when you hit it, the other one starts to vibrate. So a magnetic loop is basically what that is. You have a coil up on top inducing energy into the outer coil. And when that resonates the frequency that is being induced to it, it starts to vibrate. So they were able to understand more, the theory behind the magnetic loop. And a lot of guys really they had a lot of fun understanding it.
Well, people will be surprised what you can do with 5 or 10 watts, and they'll also be surprised what you can do with a magnetic loop. And then you can put you know, the 5 or 10 watts in the magnetic loop together and you get a double surprise. So
Right.
Yeah.
The last magnetic loop that I made, I put a huge capacitor in it, and I'm able to do 100 watts on my magnetic loop,
yeah,
and that gets you out pretty good. I mean, like yeah, the way you're right about that. The difference is a little bit of difference, but not as much as you would think between the 5. Well, my radio here, if I use an external battery, will put out 10, but
Yeah.
I get, I got almost the same achievement with the 705 as I did with the 7100.
Cool.
As far as the wattage goes.
People will sometimes almost call you a liar right to your face on the air. When you tell them you're running 3 watts or 5 watts or whatever. That's
Yeah.
happened, like you said, Greg, lots of times. They just would not believe you're running that much power
Right.
or
Yeah,
that
you're
little
right.
power. Yeah, that's
Well-
kind of fun. That's kind of fun.
Right. Well, let's get Mark's comments, KD4IMA.
Hey, yeah, really good stuff, Greg. And one of the things I'll emphasize that you went over is that if you're operating outdoors, and especially if you're a backpacker like me and like to go camping, it's a little extra weight to carry a radio, but it's a whole lot of extra weight to carry the battery that goes with the radio. And so QRP is a great way to save on battery life and take a smaller battery, something that's worthwhile carrying. So I built a little CW only rig some years back. It's from a 10-tech kit for 80 meters, and it's a great little rig. It 2.5 or 3 watts out, and so it's a lot of fun. And I can carry a battery that will power that for quite a few days, and it doesn't weigh so much as trying to carry along a big deep cycle RV battery. So not especially if you're going a lot of miles. And so I carry my little small battery with a solar charger, and I can put that out during the daytime and let it soak up some rays. And then after supper, sitting around the campfire, I can tune up the little 10-tech and use that. So that's been a lot of fun, and it is surprising how much you can do with just a little bit of power outage. I did find out though at one point, using even turning down my radio on low power to transmit, I found out that you have to be careful about which rig you use and how much power it requires on receive. So some radios inherently take a lot of power to receive as well, so that that'll help drain a battery, especially if you have limited battery life to tote around. And so that's one of the things that I'm conscious of now after running a battery dead, just listening for a few minutes with my ICOM 706, which is a lot like the 703, except it takes a lot more power to receive. That's pretty nice. And I liked Bob's new rig, and I've been trying to think about what I could take along to do some all mode stuff, especially pairing it up with a little Raspberry Pi computer to do digital modes. So that's got a lot of potential there, and we'll look at that. But I do enjoy the lower power, and oftentimes even at home with all the comforts of home, if I've just tuned my radio, flipped over to the band and tuned it and left it down on 5 watts to tune, sometimes I'll talk all evening on that 5 watts and only realize it later that I've got the power turned down on low. But I guess I'll just say that, yeah, when you're backpacking and want to keep a light load, it sure makes a difference to have a QRP rig that can last more than 15 or 20 minutes.
Awesome.
On
Well,
a note I can mention, these radios that draw a lot of current on receive. He's right. I did, since I was doing a lot of go boxes. One of my concentrations was on where all the energy goes. About the worst one is the 706, the 7000, that ICOM 7000, that thing draw like 2.5 amps on receive. So they weren't practical to be put in a portable package. The best one I found that's 100 watts, that puts out 100 watts, is the FT857. That only draws like 0.6 or 600 milliamps on receive. And the FT857 also will continue to put out almost 100 watts all the way down to 10 volts. So that's the one that I've always found that would be the best for having a 100-watt radio and have it portable. So, and that's about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everyone's the audience here. Since this is recorded, we can share it with people that couldn't make it. And I appreciate all the additional comments on QRP. So we'll drop the recording. We'll say 73 and look for future content, and join us on Zoom, if you will, in Beginners Academy. Okay, good night.